And good morning, everybody. Here are your notes and examples for IXL.com, Algebra 1, section BB.11. And we're going to be solving quadratic equations, but we're going to be using a formula to do this. Yesterday we were using factors set equal to 0, but today we're just going to look at a formula that will solve any quadratic equation without factoring. It is a lengthy formula, but once you get the numbers into it and you learn how to do all the number crunching within the formula, it is a convenient way to solve quadratic equations when you have something that is not factorable. And let's just go ahead and talk about what the formula is. So if you have a quadratic equation set equal to 0, so standard form for a quadratic equation, y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. So you have three terms. You have the x squared term with its lead coefficient a. You have the x term with its lead coefficient b. And then you have the constant term. And if you have this set equal to 0, so just like if you were factoring, you have to have it set equal to 0. So if you had this equation set equal to 0, then instead of trying to factor this, which is what we were doing in some earlier units, you can run it through a formula that will get you a solution for x. So your formula, your quadratic formula, if you want a solution for x, is going to be negative b, so opposite whatever the b value is, plus or minus, so there's going to be two possible solutions, plus or minus, the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2 times the a value. So that is our formula. So you'll want to keep this kind of close by your side as you're going through these IXL.com modules. So you're going to be plugging in essentially your a values, your b values. So you're going to need to know what your a value is, so you can put that into the formula wherever you see an a value. You're going to need to know what your b value is, because you're going to put that into the formula wherever you see the b value. And you're going to need to know what your c value is, because you're going to need to put that into the formula wherever you see the c value in the formula. So it looks kind of long and complicated. It takes a little bit of practice to get through it. But we will do a few examples and show you how to get through these. And let's go ahead and look at one from IXL.com. So here's their first problem. So here's our equation. Make sure it's set equal to 0. So that's always important. If it's not, you need to arrange it algebraically. So all the values are on one side of the equal sign, and it's set equal to 0. And the first thing you probably want to do is establish what the a, the b, and the c values are. So looking at your standard form, it looks like the a value, the lead coefficient on the variable squared, is going to be 8. The b value, the coefficient on the variable that's not squared, is 9. And your c value, right here, should be negative 8. And make sure you have that negative 8. So it's not positive 8, it's going to be the minus 8, since that's what's at the end of the equation. Don't pay too much attention to the variable. They're going to, in this IXL, they're going to keep changing the variable. It's not always going to be x, but you are just solving for the variable. So if you were to look back at the quadratic formula that we were looking at a second ago, Technically, we're solving for j in that one, so instead of having a x here, the solution for x, it's technically going to find you the solution for variable j. It doesn't really matter what the variable is. This formula just finds you the solution for whatever that variable happens to be. Usually we're using variable x, but sometimes you have variables by different names. So we're going to be solving for j here using this formula. And let's go ahead and set up our quadratic formula. So solutions for j. So the formula, let's try to make some room here. This is going to take up a lot of space. The formula, solution for j, the basic formula is negative the b value plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2 times the a value. And let's just get the numbers into the formula, and then we'll run the numbers through the formula. So j is going to equal, we need to put in the b value first, and notice there's a minus sign in front of it for the formula. So in this case it's going to be minus 9, since b is 9. If b happened to be a negative, it would be negative negative, so just watch out for that negative. So it's going to be minus 9, since we have the minus in the formula, and our b value is 9, plus or minus the square root, the b value squared, so it's going to be 9 squared. Now let's put that in parentheses, just so if you have a negative b value, remember you're squaring a negative, that's always going to be positive, minus 4. And what is our a value? Our a value is 8. Multiplied by the c value, and in this case the c value is negative 8. All over 2 times the a value, and the a value is 8. So that's going to be putting the values into the formula. So our b value is 9, we put the 9 in here, and then we also had to put the 9 in here, that was our b value. And then it was minus 4, and then we had to put in the a value, so that was our a value. And we had to put in the c value, which was negative 8. And then we had to put in the 2 times the a value. And there's your a value. So that's plugging the numbers into the formula. And we're going to have to go to a new page here so we can do the arithmetic on this, since I'm going to run out of room on this one page. So here's our setup rewritten on a fresh page, so hopefully we can fit it all onto this page. So when you evaluate this, the first thing you want to do is figure out what all those values under the radical, under the square root sign, are going to work out to be. They call that the discriminant, but we just want to figure out what all this right here is going to work out to be. You can do that on a calculator. If you look at it, it's basically going to be 9 squared, which is 81, minus 4 times 8 times negative 8. If you have a calculator that follows correct order of operations, then you could just type it in like this. If you don't, if you have a simple 4-function calculator or a phone calculator, you're going to want to make sure you walk this through in the correct order. Remember PEMDAS, our order of operations, you need to do multiplication before you do addition and subtraction. So you'll want to do this right here first. So if you do 4 times 8 times negative 8, you should get negative 256. So it's going to become 81 minus, and then this right here, the 4 times the 8 times the negative 8 is going to make a negative 256. So notice we end up with two negatives in a row because it was 81 minus, and then those three numbers worked out to be negative 256. So two negatives in a row, that's going to make that plus. So 81 plus 256 should get you 337. So all that value under that square root is going to be 337. So if we go back to our formula, we now know j is equal to negative 9 plus or minus the square root, and all this under the radical worked out to be the 337. And we still have the divided by 2 times 8. If you want to simplify the 2 times 8, you could probably go ahead and do that in this step. So 2 times 8 is just 16. So there's step 1. Figure out what the value, the discriminant under that square root is going to work out to be. And now we kind of have two different paths that we could follow. We can do the 9 plus. So notice you have your plus or minus here. So it's saying you have two answers. Just like when we were factoring, we were usually getting 2 answers. Same thing here. It's a quadratic formula. It's going to get you the same solutions you would have gotten if you were factoring. So we should have, in most cases, 2 solutions. So it's saying that j is going to be negative 9 plus the square root of 337 divided by the 16, or the other solution would be j could be negative 9 minus the square root of 337 all over 16. And IXL.com is going to ask you for the decimal approximation of this. So you're going to want to do this on the calculator. Just make sure you follow the correct order of operations. You're going to want to do the square root of 337 first, and then add that to the negative 9, and then divide by 16. So let's go ahead and kind of walk through this. So you want to do the square root of 337. That's going to get you a big, long, messy decimal. So square root of 337 is 18.35755975. You want to hang on to all those decimal places in your calculator. And then you're going to add that to negative 9. And then you're going to divide by 16. So if you're doing this correctly in whatever calculator you're using, your solution for j, rounded to 2 decimal places, they wanted it to the nearest hundredth, so 2 decimal places should be 0.58. Everyone's going to be using a slightly different calculator at home, so you're going to have to figure out what the best way is to put that into your calculator that works for you. But you need to find the square root of 337, add that to negative 9, and then divide by 16. The next one, so negative 9 minus the square root of 337. So you're going to want to do your value for the square root of 337. So you want to find this. So square root of 337. Even if you have to write down all the decimal places on a piece of paper that you're getting from whatever calculator you're using, just write down as many decimal places as the calculator is giving you. You don't want to round off too soon, or it's going to throw off your final answer at the end. So you should get that 18.35755975 number again. So let's say I was using a calculator and it didn't follow order of operations, and you needed to work this out with a simpler calculator. So it's going to be negative 9 minus, and the square root of 337 is 18.35755975. 3.5, 7.5, 5.9, 7.5, and you're dividing that all by 16. So if you need to, do it in small steps. If you happen to have a calculator that will let you just type it in all at once, you can just type in -9 minus square root of 337 and do it that way. So let's go -9 minus that square root of 337 number. And you should get -27.35755975. Divide that by the 16. And your final answer should be -1.71. So this should work out to be -1.71 if you round it 2 decimal places. So there's solution number 1. J could be 0.58. And solution number 2, J is going to be approximately to 2 decimal places, -1.71. And then you want to go type those into the answer box in IXL.com. It is a computer program, so you do need to be exact if you are not calculating correctly, if you're rounding things off too soon in your process, or if you're just not rounding correctly at the end, it's going to mark you wrong. So make sure you are being extremely careful with your decimal places when you are finding these values on the calculator, whatever type of calculator you're using. Make sure you're tracking all the place values so you can be accurate by the time you get to the end of it. So typing in your answer, you should have the -1.71 and the positive 0.58. They did say round it to the nearest hundredth, so that's why we're doing 2 decimal places, and that should be your answer for that one. And let's go ahead and set up and work through another one. So here's another example. So before you start, make sure you determine what your A, B, and C values are. So our A value will be 9. Our B value, the middle term, will be 6. And the C value will be -7. And then you want to use your formula. So set up the formula. So x equals, let's do this a little higher so we have some room. So x equals opposite the b value, plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2 times the a value. So putting the numbers into the equation, so it's going to be negative, and what's our b value? That's 6, plus or minus the square root, and it's going to be b squared. So what's our b value? 6, and that's going to get squared, minus 4, what's the a value? 9, and what's the c value? -7. And that's all over 2 times the a value, so 2 times the a, and the a is 9. So that's your setup, and then once you're there, you just need to go ahead and crunch the numbers. So we'll go do that on another screen. So here's our setup written on another screen. So x is equal to -6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times 9 times -7, all over 2 times 9. So you want to figure out what the value is under the square root first. So that's going to be 6 squared minus 4 times 9 times -7. And again, depending on what calculator you have, some calculators will follow the order of operations. You can just type it in the way it is there. If you don't have one of those types of calculators, then you want to follow the order of operations. So you want to work this out first. So 4 times 9 times -7 should get you negative 252. So 6 squared is going to be 36, and minus, and then this works out to be negative 252. Alright, so I think my iPad froze for a second there, and I lost you somewhere around here, so let's just quickly go through this one more time. I'm not sure where it froze. So the 6 squared was 36, minus 4 times 9 times negative 7 worked out to be negative 252. And two negatives in a row, that's going to make that a plus. So 36 plus 252 should be 288. And that's going to go into the formula. So x equals negative 6 plus or minus square root of 288 all over 2 times the 9, which is 18. And that's going to be our setup. Then we can split it up into the two possibilities. So we have the plus the square root of 288 and the minus the square root of 288. So one of them will be negative 6 plus the square root of 288 all divided by 18. And the other possible solution will be if we have negative 6 minus the square root of 288. So 288 all over 18. And then you just want to work out both options. So on a calculator you want to do negative 6 plus the square root of 288. This is going to make a big long messy decimal. Make sure you hang on to all the decimal places. So if I do negative 6 plus the square root of 288 on a calculator, I get 10.9705, and it keeps on going. So that number, you want to divide that by 18. And final answer for x, rounded to 2 decimal places, should be 0.61. So depending on the calculator you have, maybe with this video, go through with your calculator and make sure you can generate these numbers correctly. If you can't, it's going to be kind of frustrating to work with when you're trying to do the IXL.com problems on your own. So make sure you can do all this and actually come up with a number 0.61, just to make sure you're typing things in correctly. And then do the other one. It's going to be negative 6 minus that square root number divided by 18. And if you work that out, you should get negative 1.28. So rounding to 2 decimal places. So again, make sure you can get these on your calculators before you try the IXL.com, or else you're probably going to get very frustrated thinking that you're going through the formula correct, but maybe you're just making a calculation error somewhere. And let's go ahead and put those answers in. So here it is. There is the negative 1.28 value that we said, and the negative 0.61, or positive, excuse me, positive 0.61. So 0.61 and negative 1.28. So the next question is, how could these problems be any different? They're all kind of the same. You just plug the A, B, and C values into the formula. There can be a few little curveballs for some types of problems. So let's find one that's a little different. So this one, how is it different? Notice there's only 2 terms for this equation. So when we're looking at our A, B, and our C values, we need to kind of understand the standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. So our A value is always going to be what's on the variable squared. So in this case, the lead coefficient on the variable being squared, the m squared, your a is going to be 5 in this case. So a is going to be the 5. The b value is always on just the single variable, but notice we don't have just a single m. So in this case, your b value is 0 because there's nothing there. It's 0 times m if you wanted to put something in there. So b is going to be 0. Because if you wanted to put something in there, it would have to be 5m squared plus 0 m's because there's nothing there in the middle. So 0 m's. And then the c is going to be the minus 1 at the end. So c would be minus 1. And then you would put your a, b, and c values into the quadratic equation. So if you were to set up your quadratic formula, so your solutions for m, it's opposite the b value, plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2 times a, and put in your b value. So what's our b value in this case? It's 0. So it's going to start out with a minus 0. And negative 0 or minus 0 is just 0. So you're going to have 0 plus or minus your b squared. So it's going to be 0 squared minus 4 times the a. The a is 5. And the c is negative 1. All over 2 times the a value. So 2 times the a value would be 2 times 5. And that would be your setup for this particular one. And let's go ahead and rewrite this on another page, and we will crunch the numbers on this one. So here's our setup, and for all of them you always want to find the value that's under the radical first. So what was under the radical? That was a 0 squared minus 4 times 5 times negative 1. So 0 squared is just 0. So if we work out this right here, don't forget you have that minus sign in front of everything. So it's 0. 0 squared is 0. Minus, and then working out what's underlined in blue, what's 4 times 5 times negative 1. 4 times 5 is 20, times a negative 1 would make it negative 20. And you have 2 negatives in a row, so that's going to make it plus. So 0 plus 20 is going to be 20. So what's under the radical is a 20. So in the formula, we end up with 0 plus or minus the square root of 20, all divided by 2 times 5, which is 10. And if we work out each possible path, 0 plus, so we're going to go 0 plus the square root of 20. 0 plus the square root of 20 would just be square root of 20 divided by 10. And then you want to work that on a calculator. And you should get 0.45 if you round to 2 decimal places. And the next one is going to be 0 minus the square root of 20. So 0 minus the square root of 20 would be minus square root of 20. All divided by the 10. And work that on a calculator. So square root of 20. And you're going to take the negative form of it. So negative square root of 20. Divided divided by the 10 is going to be negative 0.45. So pretty much the same as the other one, just we have that minus, so it's going to be negative the 0.45. So there's one solution, and there's the second solution. And then you just want to go ahead and put those into the answer boxes in IXL.com. So there are your two final solutions. So one thing that you could come across is you could be missing some of those A, B, and C values. If they're not there, if they're not in the equation, if you're not finding them in the ax squared plus bx plus c form, then they would be zeros. So in this case, the b term was missing. So b would have been 0. And another possible thing that you might see, another thing you could see is you might have more negative values than some of those other examples. For example, a here would be a negative 3. B would be negative 4. And C would be negative 1. So you're just going to really have to track your plus and minus signs, but it's all going to go into the formula the same way. So your solution for Z, so the formula is negative the B value plus or minus the square root B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. So if you were to put this in, we'll just do the setup. It's going to be negative, but what is the B value? The B value is negative also, so it's negative negative, so it's going to be plus 4, since you're going to end up with two negatives in a row. Plus or minus the square root, and you need to watch out for your square here, because it's going to be a negative 4 squared minus 4, and your A is a negative 3, and your C is a negative 1, all over 2 times the A, so 2 times the negative 3. So it's going to set up the same, but you're going to really have to watch out for those plus and minus signs. To simplify a little bit, the minus minus 4 at the beginning, we know a minus minus, two minuses in a row, that's going to be a plus. So you could just say that's going to be 4. When you work out this part right here, the negative 4 squared, we know that's going to be 16. So we're going to end up with a 4. So let's see if we can squeeze this in here. So it's going to be 4 plus or minus the square root, and the negative 4 squared, a negative times a negative is a positive, so that's going to be 16 minus, and then if you work all this out right here, 4 times negative 3 is negative 12 times negative 1, so a negative 12 times a negative 1 is a positive 12, and then you already have this minus, it was here. So just this part right here works out to be positive 12, and then you have that minus that was in front there. So this is going to become 16 minus the 12 all over 2 times negative 3, which is negative 6. And that's going to simplify there. And then the 16 minus 12, that should be 4. So you're going to end up with 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 all over negative 6. And the square root of 4 is 2, so you're going to end up with 4 plus or minus 2 all over negative 6. And then there's your two options. It's 4 plus 2 all over negative 6. So one of the options, if we follow the plus path, 4 plus 2 is going to get you 6 all over negative 6, which is negative 1. And then the other one would be 4 minus 2. 4 minus 2 is 2 divided by negative 6, which would be negative 1/3. So there are your two solutions. So you should get negative 1 and negative 1/3. And you can put those into the answer box. So there's your negative 1. Negative 1/3, if you go to a decimal, that's going to be 0.3 repeating, so it would be negative 0.33. You could type in the fraction form as well. They did say they would accept fractions, or you could just stick with typing in decimals. One more quick little note. Another thing they could do is they could not have it set equal to 0 for you. So if it's not set equal to 0, you can't put it into the quadratic formula yet. You need to get this 7 over to the other side. So you're going to add 7 to both sides. So you need to do a little bit of algebra. You need to add 7. So your left side becomes 0, negative 4d squared plus 2d. And whatever you do to one side, do it to the other side. So we're adding 7 to both sides. And once you're here, now you have your A, B, and C values. So your A is going to be negative 4. Your B is going to be the 2. And your C is going to be positive 7. And then you would put those into the formula.